When we think about the Civil War, we usually picture heroes or traitors. It seems pretty black and white. But what if the real story is, well, a lot messier? Today, we're heading deep into the Appalachian Mountains to find the ghosts of the Civil War, the deserters. We're going to explore why they made the choices they did and how their hidden stories are being pieced back together, one forgotten clue at a time.
This quote right here, it just perfectly sets the stage for us. We're used to imagining the Civil War as these grand armies and epic, loud battles. But in the mountains, the conflict was totally different. It was quiet, it was personal, and honestly, a lot of the time, it was terrifying. A war fought in the shadows, and something that was only whispered about for generations.
Okay, so to really get this story, we have to just throw out the simple idea of cowardice. For so many of these men, desertion wasn't an act of fear at all. It was an act of a completely different kind of courage, the desperate fight to keep their families alive. I mean, just try to put yourself in their shoes for a second. Imagine you're a soldier, you're hundreds of miles from home, and you get a letter saying your children are starving. The cause you're fighting for feels a million miles away, but that call from your family, it's immediate, it's desperate. For these men, going home wasn't abandoning a post, it was answering a higher duty. And this wasn't just an individual choice. Oh no, that decision was magnified by the incredible pressure on their entire communities. Appalachia wasn't some monolith. It was a patchwork of conflicting loyalties, where the war literally tore the fabric of society apart. Geography played a huge role here. In these rugged highlands, your loyalty often didn't extend past your own valley or ridge. And that meant a single family might send one son to fight for the Union and another for the Confederacy. It was literally brother against brother. Can you even imagine? And listen, we are not talking about just a few isolated cases. By 1863, Confederate conscription officers were estimating they were dealing with a shadow army of over 8,000 deserters and draft dodgers hiding in the hills. This was a massive resistance movement happening right in the heart of the Confederacy, and it was draining manpower from the front lines. And all these tensions, they could turn deadly. The Shelton-Laurel Massacre is just a brutal, horrific example. Confederate soldiers rounded up and executed 13 men and boys, who they just suspected of being Union sympathizers and raiding towns for food. It shows you just how razor-thin the line was between your neighbor and your enemy. So for historians and genealogists, these records are an absolute revelation. They completely challenge that old myth of a unified Confederacy. They go way beyond simple lists of names to reveal the raw human drama of the war, the arguments, the fears, the fractures that happened not on a battlefield, but around the family hearth. So how do we actually find these hidden stories? It might seem impossible, right? But there's a surprisingly clear paper trail if you know where to look. Let's get into the detective work. See, the key is to look beyond just the official military files. The real stories are found in the margins, in local county court minutes, in the records of the provost marshal, and sometimes the most honest and heartbreaking testimony comes decades later in a widow's pension application, where the full truth could finally be told. All right, let's see how these methods work in a real-life historical mystery. We're heading to Floyd County, Virginia, to solve what was, for a very long time, just a ghost story. So for decades, people in the area told stories of the secret cabin where men hid out during the war. It was a really compelling piece of folklore, but without any actual proof, it was just that, a story. Then a genealogist finds this haunting detail in an old family Bible. A son is recorded as having died in 1864, right during the war, but there's no mention of a burial. That small inconsistency, that silence in the record, that was the key that unlocked the entire thing. This single clue allowed researchers to connect all the pieces. They found court indictments for men absent without leave from that very same area. They found land deeds proving the family owned property right where the cabin was said to be. And finally, they found physical proof, a single, unmarked field stone on the ridge. The ghost story suddenly had a name. So, what's the big takeaway here? Why is it so incredibly important to listen for these silences in the historical record? Well, what this reveals is that there were really two civil wars being fought at the same time. There was the official war of armies and muster rolls, and then there was this other war, a hidden conflict of survival fought by families whose history is written not in grand reports, but in court dockets, family Bibles, and quiet whispers. Ultimately, the absence of a name on a military roster or the gap in a pension file, these aren't just errors. They are echoes of a difficult choice, of a hidden life, and of a story that is demanding to be heard. We've just seen how a missing piece of the historical record can unlock a profoundly human story. It makes you wonder about the stories that aren't told, doesn't it? So the question I want to leave you with is this. What secrets, what choices, and what untold histories might be hiding in the silences of your own family's past?